Hi, everyone. Welcome to this panel, and thank you so much to all these awesome authors who are going to be talking with us today. Today, we are talking about basically feminism within the speculative genre. All of us here are YA authors, all of us are women, and we are really excited to be talking about this topic today. So before we jump into the conversation, I wanted to take a moment and introduce everyone here. So first up, we have Bethany C. Morrow. Bethany is the indie bestselling author who writes for adult and young adult audiences. Her next book is A Chorus Rises, which is the sequel to A Song Below Water, and it hit shelves on June 1st. Next up, we have Sarah Henning. Sarah is a recovering journalist who's worked for the Palm Beach Post, Kansas City Star, and the Associated Press. She has a number of books that are both fantasy and contemporary. But her next book is The Queen Will Betray You, which came out this past July 6th. And it is the second installment within the Princess Will Save You trilogy. And then next we have Susan Dennard. Susan is the author of the Something Strange and Deadly series, as well as a New York Times bestselling Witchland series, and she hosts a very popular newsletter for writers called Misfits and Daydreamers. Her next book, Witch Shadow, is coming out came out this past June 22nd. Yes. Then we've got Shannon Price. In Bread, Good Wine, and Good Books. Her YA fantasy debut, The Endless Skies, is coming out on August 16th. And then last but not least, we have Elaine Audrey Becker, who is a storyteller with a passion for history, myth, mountains, and magic. Her YA fantasy debut, Forestborn, is coming out on August 31st. So yes, thank you so much everyone for joining. And I'm just going to kind of jump right into it with a really broad question to just get the conversation started. We're all speculative authors, so obviously we love the genre and we love all the well-known tropes that it has. However, historically, science fiction and fantasy have been categories that have been really dominated by men, especially by white men. So, what are some of your favorite tropes and features of the speculative genre? And how does feminism, if it does, play a role in how you approach those tropes within your own work? Does anyone want to get started, or should I, call on put someone on the spot to start off with?
I can
All right,
go.
I'll jump.
I'll do it. I'll jump in. Okay. I mean, in terms of tropes, I don't get tired of tropes. I think that's actually, people love to call something cliche and tropey, but in reality, we gravitate to those things because that's what we like. So tropes actually help you identify what you're going to love most in a story. So I love Chosen One still. I'm okay with that. She's special. Yay. We all want to feel special. And so it's like tropes like that I never get tired of, and I still love seeing them. I don't want to say recycled, but refreshed in fantasy over and over again. I was lucky to discover fantasy when I was pretty young, and there really wasn't YA when I was young. It didn't really exist yet. It was like you went from reading A Wrinkle in Time to A Wheel of Time. And so it was a big jump. A lot of it went over my head, but I just feel like I'm really lucky that I discovered all of the lady fantasy authors that really defined the genre in the 70s. Ursula K. Le Guin will be my hero forever. One can only dream of achieving her level of quality and fame, but I do feel like there is an unfortunate absence of both women in fantasy throughout time, and it's particularly women of color in fantasy, but it's definitely changing a lot, and I think a lot of it's changing in YA, which is really exciting.
I'll go next because someone has to. So for me, I guess one of the most exciting things about reading and writing science fiction fantasy is the world building and the ability to create a whole new, fantastical world with its own culture and history and events leading up to, why the world is the way that it is by the time people are seeing it in the book. So thinking about feminism specifically, it was important to me, or is important to me, to create inclusive worlds where the social hierarchy is not based on sex or sexuality or the color of someone's skin or gender, you know, so forth. Things that we unfortunately see in our world. So to me, I like to steer away from creating worlds in which, you know, even in this whole new world that I've invented with its own culture and so forth, women are still treated as second-class citizens. I like to do, you know, there are certainly bases for discrimination and so forth, but that is not one of them. So that's just the way that I like to approach world building, with a feminist lens in mind.
That's awesome.
I would say that A Chorus Rises specifically is a book that I had to write because feminism has left Black women behind, and has not taken Black women into account. I could call myself feminist, but feminism as a movement has not taken my needs and my liberation seriously, and falls into the exact same issues that the rest of the patriarchal society falls into. So A Chorus Rises was really about who gets to be a strong woman, as opposed to too angry, too strong, too, you know, all of the misogynoir, which is specific misogyny directed at Black girls and Black women, and how no one seems to actually have done any work to eradicate that, or to even acknowledge or take that seriously. So I find that I don't call my work feminist, and it's not because I don't identify as a feminist. It's because my work specifically is to honor and to edify Black women, and feminism has not proven itself to do that. So I do love as Susan was saying, I love the chosen one trope, but I also, again, I'm going to always be writing from a very specifically Black female experience. And so in A Song Below Water, that trope, and just by me inhabiting it, gets subverted and twisted on its head, because it's not a world where I didn't know that I had a chosen power. It's a world in which my chosen power, because I had it, was seen as wrong and negative. So there's not, you know, a gatekeeper and a mentor who comes along to show you that, don't you realize how special you are? It's like you knowing that you're special, and the world reacting very negatively to you being special. So I think and this is why it's so important to have inclusive as opposed to diverse representation, especially in science fiction and fantasy, particularly because we have such a grand tradition of Black American authors always having used it to illuminate the truth and reality. And a lot of my world building, even in contemporary fantasy, is actually showing the real world that people don't acknowledge and that people deny. So it's really important for me to do the work that I do, especially in fantasy and science fiction, because otherwise, who's going to show the truth? Who's going to show specifically what it means to be a Black woman, and not have these sort of umbrella categories that do not serve me and do not actually take me into account?
No, that's awesome. That is so accurate and true. And one of the reasons that I actually loved reading your book recently was seeing the way that you handled the world building, and the way that you blended contemporary and fantasy to be what is actually a reality. Was really well done. So jumping off into our next question, you know, I spent the past 2 weeks reading through all of your amazing books. It was an excellent time. And one thing that I noticed that all these books have in common is you all write these really incredible female protagonists. And so I feel like this is a great opportunity to discuss what I feel like is one of society's favorite buzzwords, which is a strong female character. And I know it's a phrase that we hear all the time. And so I thought this would be a great chance for us all to take the opportunity to kind of define it, what it actually means for us, and how you kind of define it within your own writing and with your own female protagonists. Maybe Shannon, would you like to kind of jump in and start?
Sure. Speaking of tropes from the previous question, I love a strong like warrior girl, right? And so I think when we hear strong female protagonist, that's sort of like the immediate response is somebody who's very physically strong. And in The Endless Skies, my main character is a warrior, right? Like she's been training for battle, she's been training for war. But approaching strength in different ways in my female characters was really top of mind for me throughout the whole book. And I wanted to show strength well beyond physical strength and into like a more nuanced emotional way, and also, you know, how you react to this crisis that my characters are facing. So, you know, I have my main character who is training to be a warrior, and so she's physically strong. But then you have her sister who has already trained, is a warrior, but is in a position where the spotlight is on her, and she has to be mentally strong and kind of hold herself together and find her limit in a crisis that she herself is dealing with, but she because of the role that she's in, has to present herself a certain way. And like, what does that take to like remain calm and remain focused? And then going further, their mother, the mother of those two characters, one of my favorite lines in the whole book is Rowan, my main character, observing her mother and saying, she's the type of person who would offer you help before you ask it and rouse your spirits with a song, but she's not built for war. And like, it was just thinking about my own mom and like the kind of strength that she radiates. Like, you know, you can be very sure of yourself and sure of your qualities without having to like be throwing punches every 2 seconds. And so I really focused on that. And I know from reading everybody else's books, like that's something that we all can kind of touch on is going beyond the just sort of physical aspect and into the more, you know, complicated and the more nuanced way of approaching strength.
Yeah, if I can jump in too. Yeah, I mean, like, I think engaging in a world that is not set up for women was really important because it demonstrates different ways strong female characters in all of their ways are moving through the world. So the world of The Princess Will Save You and The Queen Will Betray You is hyper patriarchal because I wanted to engage with the trope of the damsel in distress and flip it. And I didn't think that you could really engage with that and make things easy for women. Like they still have to have the same barriers that women would have and actually make it worse. In this case, my main character, Amarende, is literally the most powerful person in her country after her father dies, and she cannot access her power without getting married because of the way things are set up. She is physically strong. She's been trained to be a warrior, but then for her mentally, it's, you know, getting outside of the castle where nobody really wants to hurt her when she's fighting them. And actually, can you do it? Can you take care of somebody? Can you, you know, kill them? And I think it takes a type of strength to figure out different ways around that easy, like, oh, I know how to slash a throat kind of kill and move through a world where you don't just, you know, do it because you can. Even if you are that strong kind of woman, I think, you know, engaging in the world building and figuring out different ways to make women strong and have them interact with the patriarchy as it's set up and either work within the framework or without is really important because it shows different ways that they can move around and use their brains and brawn.
Again, for me, you know, the phrase strong woman is used against me more often than not. Again, as a Black woman and writing Black girls, it's a completely different conversation. It would seem like we're having like two totally different conversations for me to talk about whether these are strong Black women, because when you have strong Black women, the world uses that as an excuse to heap burden on you or to harm you without any sort of accountability, in a way that I don't see that phrase used. If somebody says this is such a strong woman, and if that woman is white or if that woman is not Black, it's a compliment. It's not sort of a warning that I'm about to dump some stuff on you. Whereas for me, culturally in the United States and everywhere that I have lived, I have I've been taught to interpret it as, you're strong, so I can treat you however I want, and I can also make demands of that strength for my own benefit. And so when I create characters, I don't have the same question, am I making a strong female character? Because that, again, that has kind of no basis in my reality. Am I making them whoever they actually are? Am I making them three-dimensional? Am I making them vulnerable when they are vulnerable, and able to take care of themselves in a world that has required the adultification of young Black women to the point that I'm writing about teenage girls, but of course they can take care of themselves, because if they couldn't, they're in serious trouble. So I, especially with the character Naima in A Chorus Rises, I wanted, yes, to show this is a person who has her strength is in her love of herself, and in the fact that she never doubts that she's amazing, even when the sort of the society that she's in, which is supposed to be proclaiming that they're celebrating women, can only celebrate one Black woman at a time. So when the character from the previous book becomes celebrated, then obviously Naima's stock goes down, and her strength is really, it's not up to you, I'm dope. Like I still like myself. I still love myself. I'm not going to turn into a wilting daisy because you suddenly don't like me. And so for me, and this message always to Black girls, and love letters always to Black girls, is like, it's nobody else's choice. It's nobody else's decision. And that doesn't mean that it's easy when you're getting a lot of hate and when you're getting a lack of support, but it means that our strength has always had to be knowing ourselves very, very well, very, very intimately, and not taking other people's word for it. Otherwise, we would have perished by now. So I think it's really interesting to talk about things like the trope of strong women, because it's when you find out that the word woman is coded white. And unless we say that, then it looks like I'm doing the trope wrong. But I'm like, the trope doesn't apply to me. So.
Susan, you want to go next, or you want me to?
At this point, I think Bethany raised such an important point that I genuinely think that there is nothing that I can add to this that would be an important voice in that conversation. I think, Bethany, thank you for saying what you said. I am someone who's still learning a lot, and so hearing that is actually really valuable, I think, to all of us and to anyone watching this. Because it is a phrase we hear bandied about all the time, and we have this auto response to it. And hearing what it means for you and other Black women it's really important. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's wild how often we can hear things thrown around and how different phrases have different meanings for so many people. And so on our next question here, we're going to be talking about just kind of characters in general, like moving away from protagonists and just kind of backing up and looking at the whole cast that we create in our stories. And, when it comes on the topic of just empowering girls, empowering women in general, does that play a role or inform you in the way that you craft, your entire cast, protagonist, background characters, female characters, male characters, etc.? Elaine, do you want to start off?
Yeah,
don't
I'm thinking of where to start. I mean, I think I'll take it from maybe a different angle, which is that for me, I mean, still on the topic of characters, but which is that for me, the core of feminism comes back to, the belief that everyone deserves equal rights regardless of gender. So when I'm thinking about creating a cast of characters with this lens in mind, I think it's almost equally important to talk about the way that our society constructs masculinity and not just these traditional feminine roles, particularly with Forest Born, because it's a very small cast of characters, and aside from Rora, who's the protagonist, the three main characters surrounding her are all boys. And so I think a lot of the way that Western masculinity, at least, is constructed, this concept that displaying emotion or feeling things is equated with weakness, emphasizing dominance and asserting power through violence and hypersexuality and isolation, somehow cultivating this really great independence. I think a lot of that is not only very damaging for the people who are taught this, but also a lot of it is rooted in ascribing this sort of second tier status to attributes that are more traditionally feminine, like displaying emotion. And so my approach with creating the cast of characters, and just to finish off the lens that I'm talking about, was to write boys who are, gentle and feel things very deeply and lean on one another. And, they don't romanticize violence and so forth. Because I think when you sort of perpetuate these gender roles in the way that I experience them, at least, everyone loses, and it makes it that much harder to reach a world in which there is that sort of equality that I at least would like to see. So that's where my brain is at.
I mean, I'll jump in quickly too. Just bouncing off of what Elaine said. I have, since The Witch Shadow is the 5th book in this series, I have learned a lot since I started writing this book 8 years ago. And I will be very honest, because I'm honest about it always, that when I first wrote Truth Witch, I totally had a toxic masculine guy, and I was like, that's hot. And that was my own socialization speaking. And I learned a lot after that book, and by the time it actually released, there was a really long period of, selling it, revising it, and then waiting, as we all know. And I just, I went through a lot of my personal life over the space of the 3 or 4 years before I actually finished the sequel, and learned a lot about that. And so it's interesting to see readers discover the series, because you get some who love the way Merrick, this character, is in the first book, with his short temper and his I know best, and then he gets his ass kicked and he gets completely transformed over the next 2 books because of the women in his life, and he comes to terms with who he is and indeed feelings and no violence. And some people really hate that. That's not what they were into. That's not what they fell in love with him for. And so there's not much I can say to that as an author, but it is interesting to see just how much programming it goes, not just into men, but into women who really, we think that's what's sexy. We think that's what we like, because that's what we've been socialized for so long, being told is appealing and strong.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I think teenage Bethany would have loved and been like, why have you changed him? Just to be totally honest. But I find with, especially with The Chorus Rises, I'm now just kind of listening and realizing that there are majority male side characters, and they're not all alike, but I think that you could, with the exception of Gab and Shin, I think that you could characterize all of them as soft boys, and not a constant sort of thing, but I honestly just wrote them like my brothers, or guys that I am friends with and love in real life. And there's actually a huge array to their personality, and there's actually a very okay, I was totally joking with you a moment ago, but I actually need to check on you, are you actually okay? And that, to me, I didn't really think that I was writing soft boys, but one of the things that I do love is that the main guy in this book is her cousin, Courtney. And so I do really love writing a soft Black boy because I just think we need to see more of it. I know way too many to see it so neglected in representation. So I had such a good time writing their relationship. He's also kind of the only person who can tell her the truth and sort of take what you get back when you say something she doesn't like. But I really love the fact that it's not, to me, it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm intentionally having to take out masculine traits in order to make this lovable guy. I literally just had to think about the people in my life that I love and realize that I'm not feminizing or taking masculinity away. I'm just making a well-rounded person, a complete person who is in relationship with someone that he cares about deeply. And so it's going to show. But I really love those characters, and I'm really excited because even in early reads, like Courtney is one of those characters that a lot of people are talking about. And I just love that because he is a sweetheart. So
I'm also like totally pro soft boy. Like I realize that my brand is like basically girls in male dominated spaces kicking butt with soft boys. And I say this as somebody who wrote a football book. Like it's possible to have boys. I mean, there is a gamut. And I think that we do boys a disservice if we're just like, yeah, he's the guy that has the big biceps and he beats everyone up and he's grumpy all the time. I don't know. Like, I think there's so many layers to women and men and non-binary characters that we can just put into our stories because we can, and it's great. I think it's so much fun.
Okay, I have a really fun question that I wanted to throw out here because one of my favorite things I love to do when I watch panels is hear authors ramble about other books that they're excited about. It always brings me joy. So I wanted to throw out there the question of, across all types of media, whether it's books, TV shows, anything you want, what are some of your favorite female characters that you've ever encountered? And have any of them even been inspirations for your own characters? Yes or no? I just want to hear everyone talk about just some of the favorite characters they've had that really touched them over the course of their lives.
I'm happy to fangirl about the legend of Korra. And the character of Korra. I think like many people, I recently rewatched the whole series when it came onto Netflix. And I think, the whole Avatar the Last Airbender like fan base has very strong opinions. And I think Korra is like a hit or miss for some folks. But watching her, as an adult person, and just like seeing her struggle a lot and to like go, try really hard. And then she hits a wall, and like, how does she overcome that wall? And then she jumps over it, and then she hits another wall. And it's just this constant cycle of her being tested, like mentally, emotionally, her relationships get tested. And then all the while, she's just like absolutely kicking butt. And like, there's the cool action scenes. And so I think The Legend of Korra, it does what it sets out to do and tells this really intricate, thoughtful story about somebody who has been building up this idea of what they're going to be, right? Like the first scene you see her when she's a child, she's like, I'm the Avatar and you got to deal with it. And like, that's the energy she brings. And then the world is just like, well, maybe don't need an Avatar. And like, that's how she is like, oh, how do I handle it? Yeah, I could go on and on, but I'm very curious to hear other people and what fan bases that they love and support. But yeah, Legend of Korra, and specifically the character of Korra, are really impactful for me. And talk about strong woman, right? Like she does everything, both fighting and bouncing back and being resilient.
Yeah, I'm surprised by the names that came to mind as soon as you asked this question. So I would say a female character that I absolutely adore, I think these are all going to be kind of similar, even though they don't sound like it, is Annalise Keating, of course, from How to Get Away with Murder, which is as much for her messiness as for her brilliance, as for her just resilience, her just refusal to stop even when it gets ludicrous and you like almost can't take this show seriously. But the reason I think anybody watched that all the way through was because of the character of Annalise. She was one of the most real people, especially as a Black woman, and showing her both being, the strong Black woman, but also being loved and desired, and also making really big mistakes that you cannot say she did not make. Like you can't say, she was never a perfect person. The second person that came to mind is Jessica Day from New Girl, because I'm sorry, I loved her immediately, and I was always so mad when people were annoyed with her, or people would be like, she's my least favorite person on the show, which my son is obsessed with New Girl and has watched it in total like 4 times all the way through, and still maintains that like she's his least favorite character. But I love that she is persistently girly. She is like, it just never lessens at all. Even the number of times that you see people almost treat her like, I don't even know if you're smart because you're so girly all the time. And she just never stops doing it. She's like, I like it. I like being this way. I like these clothes. I like baking. I'm gonna keep doing it. And I love her. And then the last one is somebody that I don't actually like. It's Alicia Florrick from The Good Wife, which I don't know if that makes me seem old, but I really, she is such an amazing example of, I think that TV show literally across all of the characters has the most character development I've ever seen on television. Like, all of these characters actually develop, actually change, actually evolve, to the point that by the time the show ends, I do not like Alicia Fleur. Like, I would never hang out with this person. I would never be cool with this person. But watching her story unfold from where she began, and it just felt like such a real person, such a true person, that she is impacted and changed and, based on everything that happens. And so are the other characters. And I am consistently blown away with the writing of that show and her character in particular. And it goes to show that, like, I don't need to want to be friends with a character to be able to acknowledge that this is a really well done character. Like, this is a really well written character. And she doesn't ever stop to be palatable or to get the audience back or something. And there's also other characters for you to love in that show. So if you don't like her, it's actually totally fine. But Diane being one of them, but she came to mind immediately because I just remember being so impressed with just her evolution.
Okay, I can jump in. The first name that comes to mind for me is on the show The Expanse. Bobby Draper is just, yes, I'm so glad you get it. Bobby is one of those characters who at first, too, I was like, I don't know about you. You're so aggressive. Talk about like typical strong female, I'm angry and powerful. And then just similar to Cora, like she loses her place, her empire, her nation of the Mars people, like no longer have power, and who she thought she was and what she could do disappears. And so like her arc over the series, and it's just so like well acted. It's such a good show. All the women on that series are just incredible. They just run the gamut of like different kinds of strength. And so yes, that was like the first thing that came to mind for me. Yeah.
I'm going to regret this for the rest of my life because I cannot believe that Christian and Bobby are not the first names out of my mouth. Susan!
It's okay. I forgive you. I forgive you.
I'm so sorry. That is on me. Okay. I'm so sorry.
I forgive you. And now we've talked about it, so everyone knows. Everyone knows.
And what is this show called again? Because I'm like writing this down in my head.
It's The Expanse. It was originally on Sci-Fi and now on Amazon, thankfully. Thank you, Amazon. Picked it up and finished it. It's incredible. Like it's it's definitely a lot of world building dumped on you at once, but it's a really good show.
Awesome. Does anyone else want to throw out some characters? Because if not, I have a question that I do want to make sure we get to before the end, because I'm excited to talk about it. But I also want to hear more about characters. So.
I want to toss one in that I forgot existed until Bethany was talking about Jessica Day being unapologetically her, which is, oh God, it's Winona Ryder's character. What is her name? In Stranger Things. Is it Joyce? I don't know. The mother character who everyone says is crazy and that is right the whole time about what's going on. And I just remember watching that for the first time and being obsessed with the fact that they took the crazy woman trope and just turned it on its head, because she was absolutely right. I gotta give a shout out to her.
Oh, absolutely. It's so true. So the one question I really wanted to make sure we get to before we reach the end here is, because in addition, we all write speculative fiction of some sort, but we also all write YA. And so I really want to make sure we talk about, what is it that drew us into writing fantastical stories within the YA space, as opposed to, younger or older? Like, what made us want to write this?
Well, I could say I write for adult and for young adult. So I am doing something specific when I'm writing for young adult. For me personally, I'm trying to edify Black girls. I'm trying to, I think most importantly, give them language to describe the things that I know that they already know. But one of the things that I remember, even being, as gregarious and easily conversational as I was the really difficult things that you're gaslit about, not always having the language at the time to say, yes, this is what's happening, and I know this is what's happening. And I want to make them feel seen and give them a love letter that says, I see you and I know that this is true, but also, like I said, to empower them if they so choose, because I don't ever intend for my work to be a call to action or a call to arms, especially for Black girls. Like, absolutely not. It's literally more so for you to know that I know you're there. But I definitely want I want Black girls to be able to read the work and have the language from fellow Black girl characters describing how they feel in case they need that, in case that's something that they haven't built yet. So when I write young adult, it is very intentionally with a tenderness to the target audience in mind. It's very much, that's how I know a lot of times if a concept is adult or young adult, is how am I approaching the reader? How do I, how much grace is being extended in the way that I tell the story and the concessions that I will make and the explicitness of what I'm talking about. Because with adults, I'm like, you have a brain, you can figure it out. And if you don't like it, you can put it down and you can walk away, whatever. And you don't come to YA that same way, because you are intentionally taking care and you do understand that I'm trying not to add any more harm to what you're already experiencing, while I'm trying to talk about something that I know you actually experience that isn't always wonderful. So I very much feel a caretaking aspect is involved in my YA writing.
I think, teenagers really lend themselves to understanding and enjoying fantastical stories, because there's this sort of like decision-making recklessness that you can do as a teenager when your frontal lobes aren't, completely developed. Not to sound completely like my mom, but like, I was like a very careful teenager. I was so boring. I was the kid that like my friends were like, okay, the party is going to go past 9. You should go home, because they knew I would be uncomfortable with anything like crazy happening or whatever. And so I shied away from writing YA for a long time, because I was like, I was really boring. Like, who wants to read what I have to say? But the truth is that like teenagers, they're always down for a great story. They have this great suspension of disbelief, and they deserve to get away from this world and just enjoy themselves. And, you know, like I don't write with anything else in mind other than trying to write a good story that hopefully they'll enjoy, and hopefully teen me, you know, should have really enjoyed, maybe saw herself in. And, you know, like, I think that's okay. Like, I don't have a really like, you know, big meaning for doing this other than I really enjoy it. And I hope that the kids do too, you know?
I think for me, I just feel very inspired by the younger generations. I think, you know, they're dealing with a lot right now. And so for me, the idea of writing something for this demographic that inspires me is just exciting and rewarding on a personal level. And then the thought that maybe something I write could inspire some of them in return is, yeah, just a really rewarding idea for me.
Yeah, I think kind of going off what you said, Elaine, like one of the things I remember from being a teenager is everything felt so big. And I think one of the cool things about YA, we're always talking about the stakes, like what is at stake, what are the consequences. And I think teen readers can really relate to teen characters, even if they're not facing the exact situation. Like the way that the characters navigate whatever their crisis is, whatever the stakes are for them, you know, there's usually something you can either take away and hang on to, you know, guide your own life, or you can at least be, you know, oh, that, you know, they did it, they overcame it, they messed up, they fixed it. Like there's lessons that you can kind of help give without being really like, you know, without like making the story stuffy, but you can kind of help readers maybe navigate a hard time through your characters and hopefully leave an impression on them that they can take with them, you know, as they get older.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have any other reasons to add to what everyone said. I think I know when I first sat down to start writing for serious and try to be like an author, I just, the books that still stand out to me the most are the ones that I read when I was a preteen and a teen. And at the time, they weren't necessarily books for teens, but they were the books that I still think about and I still have the most vivid feelings about. And so I knew, and then the ones that got me through. High school was awful for me. I had a horrible junior high and high school time. I was really, really, really small and skinny, and I just got bullied mercilessly. And so it was I just took refuge in books, you know, as many authors have at some point, and I took refuge in writing. And so that was when I sat down to like write for serious. I decided I want to write for kids like me. I just want to write for that teen Susan who like hated going to school every day, but like at least had this to read. You know, I literally hid in the library during lunch. I could hide in the library and read these books and feel like I was somewhere safer. And so, yeah.
No, I totally relate to all this. I mean, I also write through multiple age categories, and I feel like just hearing everything that you guys said about, you know, why you chose to write this or what it might be like if you write other things, it completely hits home. Now, I know we're running a little low on time, but I did want to give everyone a really quick opportunity, really quick, to throw out, you know, what is next for you in your books? What do readers have to look forward to? If anyone wants to start off, I'll say, Sarah, you want to start?
Sure. So The Queen Will Betray You is the sequel to The Princess Will Save You. The Princess Will Save You's paperback is out in July. The Queen Will Betray You is out in July. And then there's a third book that we decided we wanted to do because we couldn't stop with the sword fighting and the kissing and, you know, everything. There's a book called The King Will Kill You, which is going to be out in August of 2022.
Awesome. So Chorus Rises obviously came out in June, and my next release is in September, and it is a remix of Little Women called So Many Beginnings, with a cast of Black sisters known as the March Sisters, and it takes place in 1863 North Carolina on a freed people's colony, and I love it to bits. So that is So Many Beginnings, September 7th.
Want to go just down the list? Susie, you want to go next?
All right. So Witch Shadow just came out. And the next thing up for me, even though this is not the last book in the series, the last book, I'm not sure when that's coming out yet. Publishing doesn't always make these decisions properly, but I do know that I have another series starting next year called The Luminaries, which was based on a Twitter adventure. It was originally an idea I tried to sell years ago, but the genre was dead, and so then I repurposed it many years later on Twitter, and it was like a crowdsourced adventure, and now that will be hitting shelves in 2022.
I can't tell if I'm next because I think everyone knows different. So I'm just going to go. Yeah, so Forest Born is out on August 31st. And it's book one in a duology. So what's next for me is getting book two ready to be published, which it is not, but it will be at some point. So that's what I'm working on.
Awesome. And then The Endless Skies comes out August 17th. It is for folks who like Adrienne Young, Saba Tahir. It is a fun, just adventure, and I hope people like it. I have a pre-order campaign going for some very shiny metal bookmarks, so check that out. And after this, I'm off contract, so I'm a little bit of a free bird, but I'm writing a book that I kind of call my like magical matchmaking book. So it's like Bridgerton, but like with magic and some other fun, very romantic, fluffy vibes. So it's been a lot of fun to write so far.
Sounds awesome. So I think we're wrapping up on time here, but I wanted to just say thank you all so much for all of your fun and insightful comments on this. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. I was very honored to be asked to moderate this. Really, really loved hearing everything that you had to say, and I imagine that everyone watching this will feel the exact same way. So I wanted to extend my thanks, and yeah, you all so much. And I did also apparently forgot to introduce myself, which I'm being told now. My name is Amanda Foodie, and what's next for me is that I have a book that I wrote with my best friend, Christine Lynn Herman, who is another awesome YA author. And it's called All of Us Villains, and it is coming out on November 9th. Yeah, so thank you all so much for joining. And yeah, this was really, really awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you so much.